Hello everyone, it's David from Automotive Press. I have a very exciting all-new 2023 Range Rover Sport, which is by far my favorite SUV from Range Rover so far. I'm going to show you my normal quality audit and checks and balances, as well as tell you a little bit more about the engineering behind Range Rover, because I have been to their factory and their head office in UK several times, and so I'm really interested to show you what's going on with this model. So let's go. Welcome back. So I'm going to do my usual engineer's quality audit, but what you need to know is that Range Rover engineers, or for that matter, Jaguar Land Rover engineers, have spent enormous amount of time re-engineering to produce a whole new product from scratch and to make sure that this is more reliable than ever possible, which is a big deal because Jaguar Land Rover products have not been the most reliable product so far. So I have some confidence that this product, more than any other product from their brand, will be durable and reliable compared to some of the products from the past. But first, let's check the body panels, alignment, fit, and also the paint job, which I always talk about in the beginning of my review. Now, there's something very interesting to show you because, as I mentioned to you, the engineering behind this vehicle is quite clever. So for example, when you look at the hood here, this hood goes over this front fender, so I cannot even measure the gap. There is no gap. So this is kind of clamshell design, and because they put a crease over here, I can't even measure the actual gap. But if I have to look at it from underneath, it's actually less than 3 millimeters because it's going over the fender. So that's very smart. Now, when you look at the door and the front fender, they also put a filler. As you can see, there's a rubber gasket, which is not common, but they've done that to make sure that it's better insulated, and also it kind of tricks your eyes in the sense that the gaps are not obvious. So once again, very clever engineering. But if I have to measure a gap, it's 4.5 millimeters, so a little bit wider than what I like to see, but at least you don't notice it because of the filler that's in that door there. Same thing here, front door and back door, also about 4.3 millimeter, but they also have a gasket or a molding here to both insulate the sound, but also to make it look more flush. And finally, the rear part here, between the second door and the rear fender, it's about 3.5 millimeter and very aligned all the way through. It's actually pretty flush against each other, and I don't see any of the panels sort of out of shape or out of the spec, so everything looks good. And even the rear hatch over here is quite good. This is where most manufacturers kind of mess up in terms of quality, but it's about 4 millimeters and extremely flush with each other, all flat and looks aligned, and so looks really good. And even over here down to the bumper area, which sometimes gets a little bit messed up in many models that you see from Europe, looks fantastic. Now obviously by now you've noticed that this is the matte paint, which means that it is both really interesting to see, but also very difficult to maintain. You cannot wax or polish or even repair minor defects in a paint job like this because it's missing the clear coat basically. So it looks fantastic in a model like this, and I really like it because this is a cool thing to do nowadays. But from an engineer's perspective, this is absolutely the wrong paint to have if you want to maintain it and be able to fix minor scratches and so forth, because it's almost impossible to make those corrections on a matte paint. But other than that, in terms of the consistency of the paint, all across all the panels looks really good. And other than the fact that you can leave some fingerprint when you touch them too much, it looks really fantastic. All the way through the panel looks all aligned. You can see these ridges look lined up as well. And all these plastic components look like they're well placed onto the panels as well. So I think the quality has really improved a lot, which is something they wanted to focus on for this new generation of Range Rover Sport. And as usual, the design is fantastic, and I'm really glad that the engineering underneath have improved substantially. Now let's go and measure the paint thickness to see how that is, to give you a little bit more feel on how good the paint job is. So I have the paint thickness gauge here, which measures the total amount of paint that's above the metal piece underneath. And for Range Rover Sport, it's mostly aluminum underneath, but it's also missing the clear coat, so the paint thickness should be a little bit thinner than normal. Usually paint thickness is between 100 to 180 microns. I'd like to see it around 120, that's pretty well average. Let's see how it is on this Range Rover Sport. 136, so that's pretty well normal for an average European models because European paint tend to be a little bit thicker than what we see in North America. Let's try the front door. 292, let's double check that. 324, so this is almost 3 times, 2.5 times thicker than the front hood here, which means that there was some minor repairs that were done here, or they had to put additional layer of paint, maybe because it didn't quite match originally. So this one has a little bit more paint than the other panel. What about the rear door? 248, so once again, it has a little bit more paint as well. And finally over here, 385, so this is quite a bit thicker, ridiculously thick actually. So it's good for durability because you obviously want thicker paint, but it doesn't mean that they probably had to paint this section a couple of times to get this matte finish just perfect. And so it has extra layer of paint compared to the front. Now if you go to the other side here, you'll notice that it's not quite as thick. 289 here, so a little bit thinner than the other side, and the door here 198, and the other side was over 300, so you know for sure that side had extra layer of paint to get the matte finish looking perfect. What about the front door here? 407, so this one too had not a repair, I wouldn't call it repair, but they probably had to layer extra paint just to make sure that everything looks uniform from the front to back. Or because this is an early production model, they were still kind of toying with the correct thickness of the paint, and so maybe the machine calibration and so forth is not quite finalized yet, and they end up putting extra paint. So nothing wrong with that in terms of consumer side, because you're going to end up with a car with extra paint, but it's definitely not consistent across all the panels. But when I look at it from a different angle, it looks good. Nothing seems to be out of whack. All the paint seems to match properly. So whatever they did to make sure that everything looks good was done correctly, because it doesn't look like there has been extra paint layers on some of these panels, but this thing doesn't lie. So I can tell by the machine that there was some additional paint applied. Either way, it looks really good in terms of overall quality so far. And I know the reliability is still a big question mark for Range Rover and Land Rover products, but once again, I have some faith that some of the engineers I met in UK have done a really good job to improve the overall durability and reliability. So let's hope that is the case, and we won't know until this has been around on the street for a few years. Let's take a quick look inside now and see what they've done to improve the quality and also whether I like it as an engineer. So now I'm inside the Range Rover Sport, and as usual, the designers have done an amazing job to make this thing look absolutely gorgeous. It's upscale, beautiful to look at. All the materials feels really nice, and there's no question when it comes to design and basic engineering, they do it better than anyone else. But what about the overall quality? Well, so far I have not heard any squeaks or rattle, which is something I expect maybe from a Jaguar Land Rover product, but it's been absolutely quiet and trouble-free so far, and all the materials looks really good. The stitching and so forth looks really good. All the parts seems to fit well. I was trying to look for some gaps, but everything is well put together. The materials look good. I mean, most of these materials will be built by a vendor, but nothing seems to be out of place, and the design once again looks really good. There's some quirky things like the fact that this is curved to make it look nice, but honestly it has no functional purpose other than that it looks a little bit nice because it's kind of give you that three-dimensional look. And also the door handle is way in the front here, so it's hard to open. Not sure why the engineers did it that way. They combined the seat memories in here with the actual seat adjustment, which is kind of odd. So again, they do some really unusual things, but the design looks good and it's quite functional, and more importantly the parts also look good. I could not replicate any kind of squeaks or rattle. Everything looks tight when I do my punch test, and the parts just feels good. The leather feels good. All the vinyl and plastic pieces also look and feel good as well. I don't like the system too much in terms of how it works, because there's this kind of fake pressing feel, I guess, if you want to call it that way, and I believe you can turn that off, but it feels very unnatural, so I don't like that. But it's a very clean system that is improved a lot over the years, and at least we get buttons. We have buttons for radio, we have actual physical control for the temperature, and these ones here are not real buttons, but again you get tactile feel, so you can kind of feel the button as you push them along. The center digital cluster also looks fantastic. It's very bright, it's easy to see, and everything else in terms of material management, in terms of the contrast of the cloth to the leather, looks fantastic. That's obviously their strength when it comes to designing these kind of product. And most people who would come into this car will say, wow, this thing looks expensive, and it is an expensive model. But somehow other brands like Lexus, Infiniti, these Japanese brands just can't seem to design something that looks as good as Range Rovers. There's something instantaneously recognizable when it comes to design for Range Rovers, and that's something they really do well. So now I'm driving the Range Rover Sport, and obviously this is the most important part of the entire review. But I'm going to tell you that of all the different Range Rovers products I have driven over the years, this is the best one in terms of driving feel. Finally, we get real feedback from the road. The steering is not hydraulic, but it kind of feels like one with a proper feedback and communication between my hands and the road. So fantastic drivability and the feel on the road. And the 3-liter twin turbocharged engine with a mild hybrid has a beautiful feel. When you step on it, it just takes off without any hesitation, and it provides that real true luxury Range Rover feel. I think of all the things that they've done to make this Range Rover Sport exceptional, I would say the driving feel, the driving character, and the engine feel is something that they really focused on, which is what I heard from engineers anyway. The ride is also just right. It's not too stiff, it's not too soft. It's much more sportier than most Lexus or Infiniti models. So if you compare the Japanese luxury models, this one has a much better feel. I would even say that it has a little bit more sporty feel than some of the newer Mercedes and BMW models, because those cars have become very soft over the years and there's not much of a road sensation anymore. But this one, as I make quick turns and take the corners with some speed, it stays surprisingly stable and agile, unlike the larger Range Rover, which is way too soft for me. That one is comfortable and luxurious, but it has absolutely no road feel, and perhaps that's the intention of that product. But this one, with the name Sport, they obviously tried to make it a little bit more fun to drive, and they've succeeded that with absolutely no hesitation whatsoever. And even though I'm not really sure if I would buy a Range Rover product in the future, just because I still do worry about the overall reliability, in terms of just the driving feel, and if I just need to lease a car for a few years, this is an absolutely beautiful car to drive, beautiful car to own, and I really enjoy driving it. So for example, if I compare it to Lexus models, which is what I often like to do because, as you know, I own a number of them, this one is just better engineered for driving feel, and it has a more of a precision feel that is lacking in the Lexus LX or even the GX. Beautifully designed, absolutely love the driving. Engine is fantastic, has tremendous power thanks to the mild hybrid system that works with a turbocharged engine. So what do you guys think of the Range Rover Sport? It's a beautiful car inside and out, absolutely fantastic to drive, and even the quality and the engineering behind it seems to have improved dramatically compared to before. I've been to the factory there and I can attest to the fact that their quality control has improved, so I really do think that long-term reliability will also be improved on this new generation of the Range Rover Sport. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this model or anything else for that matter, and if you haven't done so, if you could subscribe, I would truly appreciate it. But until next video, I'm signing off for now. Thank you so much.